The subject of this video is to compare the Sony RX100 Mark II and the Sony RX100 Mark III for street photography, and in specifically shooting from the hip. I've had the Mark III now for probably 3 weeks, and it's a really nice camera. It's great. I find that in my street photography I don't have a whole lot of use for the Viewfinder. I have taken a couple shots with it just to see how it worked, and interesting is that when you put your eye up to this puppy, it shuts off the LCD, so you don't have to mess with that. So that's pretty automatic. Basically, the quality is pretty much the same. The M3 has an extra fine setting, and I'm not a pixel counter, and I haven't blown up the Mark II and the Mark III to make comparisons like some people would do. I just take pictures, and for street photography they look pretty much the same. So I guess the question is, if you're going to be just doing street photography, nothing else, the M2 will just be fine. You don't have to spend the extra $700 plus $800 for this guy. I buy toys, so that's why I have these things. I like to play around with them. So for street photography, if you have a Mark II and that's all you're doing, fine. Now if you're doing other things, well, then this thing has some advantages, the Mark III. For example, let's say that you are shooting in an area where sometimes you have the wrong light and you need a fill flash. Well, if you have the M2, you set the menu to fill flash, and then when you turn the guy on and you're ready to take a picture, up pops the flash, and you get your picture. On the other hand, if the next shot has enough light, you don't want to fill flash, it still comes up. Whereas with the Mark III, you can set your menu for fill flash, and nothing happens until you push this little button, this little guy here, and he brings up the flash, and then when you take the shot, you get the flash. And if the next shot doesn't need a flash, you push it down, and when you push the button, you don't get the flash. Now let's compare the zoom. Now the native mode of this thing, the optical mode in the Mark II, is 28 to 100 in 35mm equivalent. 28 to 100. The Mark III is 24 to 70. Now 24 to 70 is a very good range. And in street photography, is there a whole lot of difference between 24 and 28? No, I don't think so. In general photography, the Mark II zooms from, a lot of people don't, you talk about these cameras, you don't think much about the zoom, but the Mark II zooms from, if you have all the zoom things turned on, you can go from 28 to 390, I think it is, which is a pretty good range. But now, when you're down at the low end, in its native mode, you have a 20 megapixel camera. When you're at the high end, you're at a 5 megapixel camera. So it's not like you're 20 all the way out. It's not, you don't have that. Now this guy here, the Mark III, he goes from 24 to 70, but with all the opticals turned on, it goes from 24 to 280. Now what I have noticed is, maybe it's because I use the extra fine, when I zoom way out on this guy, on the Mark III, the quality seems to be a little better on the high end. So now I shoot JPEG. When I was using the Nikon, I was always in using RAW, and the reason I did JPEG is that when I got the Mark II, I was out on a shoot and I had it for RAW, and as I zoomed in, I saw a subject that I wanted to get closer to, and I got as close as I could, but this person was still very small, and it was just an experiment. I didn't really want to walk up to the person. So I went over on video, and I said, suddenly the zoom was amazing. I said, wow, this thing really zooms. So then I played around. I realized that when you're in RAW, you get the optical. You get the 28 to 100 in the Mark II. You get the 24 to 70 in the Mark III. But when you put it in JPEG, then you go from 28 to 390 or something like that. And this guy, the Mark III, you go from 24 to 280. So it's a pretty good zoom range. The Mark III is still usable at zooming way out, even though the megapixels are down. It zooms, it's very, very well. It does very well. So there's a lot of menus on here I don't use. I don't use a lot of menus, even in my other cameras. I just use the things that I need. So in short, if you're just doing street photography and you don't really need that viewfinder, I've tried it a couple times, but I'm kind of using the LCD. It's quite bright. Even in a bright day, it's fine. But most of the time I'm shooting from the hip, but when I do use the viewfinder, it works great. Also, when you're at a party, this is kind of neat. On the Mark III, you can flip this guy all the way up, and you can get like a selfie. But what's cool is you point this at a couple people that are together, and they see themselves and they make kind of goofy faces or unusually smiley faces, and you push the button when they're looking, and then later when you look at it, it's you get some neat shots. So that's pretty cool. And if you're a selfie person, hey, put it on and do your selfie. So again, street photography, you got a Mark II, and that's all you're doing is street. You don't need the Mark III. And again, I haven't done a significant amount of things outside of street photography, but I do know there's a lot of features on the Mark III that are worth having. So if you're doing other things, you might want to upgrade. But like I say, both cameras are great. I love these things. All right, thank you for watching. And again, if you want to see some of the street photography I do, it's on travelwp.com. travelwp.com. Thank you for watching.